Hello there, I'm Mike Flanagan, coming to you from Spotify Studios in Los Angeles, and welcome to SpectreVision Radio's production of Director's Commentary. On each episode of this show, myself and my guest filmmakers will watch one of their movies together and offer you, the listeners, a chance to watch along with us as we talk about the film, what went into making it, and anything else that may come up along the way. So make sure you've got the movie queued up, your snacks are at the ready, and we'll let you know when it's time to hit play so we can all watch together. My guest today is an award-winning Australian writer, director, producer, and actor, and has created some of the most enduring and popular franchises in modern horror. In 2003, he made a short film with a friend from film school in order to prove a concept for a feature they wanted to make. The friend was James Wan, the film was Saw, and it changed the genre. The team created Lightning in a Bottle again 8 years later when he wrote the script for and acted in the 2011 paranormal thriller Insidious, birthing another juggernaut franchise. With credits including 7 Saw movies, Dead Silence, 5 Insidious films, Cooties, The Wonderful Upgrade, The Exceptional The Invisible Man, and the upcoming reboot of The Wolf Man, this filmmaker is one of the most prolific and successful working today. Please welcome Leigh Whannell. Thank you so much for being here, man.
That was great diction there. No stumbles. You missed a career in broadcasting.
Oh,
you
yes.
should be calling horse races or something.
Yes, this was the, I've had a lot of comments throughout my life about having a face for radio, and I just took it the wrong way. And now, now it's really paying off for me, finally. So this is great.
It's not too late.
It's never too late. Look, I'm so excited to be sitting and talking with you today. We go back a little bit. We've known each other kind of peripherally now for a little more than a decade. I believe we met at your I think rented place in South by Southwest.
Oh, yes.
Many years ago.
Now, were you there with Oculus?
Yes, I was. Yes.
Now, I loved Oculus. I remember just, as you know, horror fans are often starved for quality. You're seeking out these morsels, the good ones.
Right.
You can love a whole broad range of horror movies, and sometimes the reason you love them is because of how bad it is. It's those films
Absolutely.
where you're like, God, this film was it was so dumb. It made no sense. I loved it. but then you'll come across a film like Oculus where you're like, oh, it's like a sustenance for a starving man. You're like, this is someone who cares. And so I remember being, kind of meeting you. I was like, oh, this guy is, he's coming up. Because back then, it
was my first movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, we every time a young filmmaker at Sundance does a deal with A24 for their trauma metaphor about a woman turning into a caterpillar, I'm like, Mike and I paved the way for these people. We took horror seriously when it was one step above porn in terms of industry respect. We were there in the
that is a fact. The genre has historically, and when we met especially, was not at all you hear elevated genre thrown around a lot now, right? Like it's a rough phrase.
That term, somewhere around 2010, this phrase elevated horror came into existence. And I think, something happened, something changed within the genre. It became successful enough that it sort of mutated one extra limb, which was this kind of artistic horror. Yeah. Some Venn diagram between the art house and the grindhouse.
Right.
Films that I love, like Hereditary and The Babadook, but yes, that was not the case in 2005.
No, and I think coming off of The Wasteland, that was a lot of the 90s horror. There's some incredible things in there too. Incredible things.
I know,
in there.
but it was rough. It was rough. Yeah. It was rough. I think, and then you had the 80s, which was the VHS era of franchisable monsters, which weirdly, totally inadvertently, accidentally, James Wan and I ended up creating sort of a millennial Freddy Krueger. I mean, you said that. Yeah, I was only actually involved with 3 of those movies, but they just made the 10th.
Well, and I think you're listed as an executive producer on 7. But
exactly.
It was 1, 2, and 3 that you were
directly involved with, yes. And then I was kind of like, that's it. I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
And they kept going.
And they're going to keep going.
And they'll keep going.
There's no way they're not going to
At a certain point, it will cross over. It will pass Jason Voorhees and Freddie. I think they'll get past that number, which is astounding to me as someone who grew up watching those VHS sleepover movies like Friday the 13th Part 6.
Right.
And, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. To now be in that club is really weird.
Well, and isn't it weird when you have people who can say to you, like adults, you meet an adult somewhere who says, "I grew up with your franchise." Since I was a little kid, I've been fascinated by, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
ouch.
I always puke in my mouth a little bit when somebody says like, "Oh, I wasn't allowed to watch Saw when it first came out. I had to wait till I became a teenager." And I was like, "Excuse me, does anyone have a one of those air sick bags?" Yeah, it's an interesting time. But then what's weird is, there are filmmakers now who were like, "Oh, you inspired me so much as a kid." It's great, I guess.
It's a wonderful thing.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm happy with that.
Well, it's an incredible thing that you guys did, and I want to kind of get into how you did it. And I don't want to spend, because we're going to be watching your brilliant movie, The Invisible Man, together, which I'm so excited to sit with you and watch this movie with you.
Great.
And I don't want to keep us too far away from that, but there's so much about your early career that I'm really anxious to talk about, and that I like to think a lot of the people that listen to this show have ambitions to make movies themselves, and I feel like you exemplify what that really means to kind of learn about the genre, to look at it. You were a critic, to begin with. You were criticizing the genre that you loved in a constructive and loving way, and then you were making it, and you did it yourself, which is, I think, the most profound thing a filmmaker can do to launch their career is just to do it. And you guys did, and I really want to dig into that. So,
absolutely,
the way the show works is we break it up into 3 acts. The first, Act 1 is setup, a little bit about you and how you got here. Act 2 is the movie itself, and Act 3 tries to pull everything together. So here we are in Act 1.
Wish I could do that in my writing.
I know, right? It sounds so easy.
You just made it sound so easy.
It's all symmetrical. It's all thunder and lightning, and it's going to work out. But just a couple of questions, 4 questions for you before we kick off. But the first, what traumatic incident in your life pushed you into filmmaking? Which is to say, give me the elevator pitch of your origin story. When did you fall in love with movies?
I fell in love with movies very early on. My dad was he worked in television. He worked at an Australian TV station, the ABC, which was, I guess the American equivalent would be something like PBS. So It was a TV station funded with government money, no commercials. But growing up with him in that world kind of demystified the media for me. When I would go to work with him, I'd be in a studio like this, watching newscasters present the news, and I really got a peek behind the Iron Curtain of media. And maybe that had something to do with it, just him being in that world. But I remember, I'm really aging myself, but I remember him coming home with like a Betamax video player that he had won in a golf tournament. This thing was the size of a microwave oven, and he puts it down, and we all went to the video store as a family, and I saw the cover for Jaws. And I think I was obsessed with movies, but something snapped in my brain when I saw that cover, and I just remember my dad wouldn't let me get it, and I just kept asking about it, and it became this obsession. I can still recall it all to this day. I was probably 5 years old, and eventually my dad just relented. He just gave up, like, this kid isn't going to stop, and he let me watch Jaws. And it was really from that moment the obsession that has defined my life began. Like, my identity in high school was the movie guy. That's what people, I went to a suburban Australian high school, and everybody was into football and whatever, surfing. I was the movie guy.
Yeah.
And, then when you go to film school, you're surrounded by a bunch of yous.
Right.
You're
not the only movie guy.
You're not the only guy. And by the way, not the most talented either. It's always a bit of an ice bucket challenge when you get to that level. You meet someone like James Wan and you're like, oh, wow, you're really good. I thought suddenly you realize, it was easy to be the best filmmaker at Brandon Park Secondary College. Now I'm here. But that was really it. It was this obsession. And it took many different forms. It wasn't as linear as I want to be a film director. Like I was in acting classes.
Yeah.
I really just wanted to be near this flame, and I didn't care. At first it was acting. It wasn't until I was in late high school that a particular teacher, he's the one who flipped the switch from being in front of the camera to behind it.
Right.
He showed me Taxi Driver, and so that's really the origin story. When I look back now, this is the thing that has defined my life. I'm sure it's the same for you, you know.
Oh, it is, and so similar. I think you and I are about the same age. I think we're maybe a year apart. It's Jaws for me as well, and for a lot of people our age.
Yes,
I hear it's Jaws. Like Jaws seizes your imagination and your heart, and
it really does. It's interesting to talk about this because, you know, of course, in our generation, Star Wars was a game changer, like
big time.
But every kid loved Star Wars.
Yeah.
All the kids that I knew that weren't movie obsessives loved Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark and all these popular movies. You know, us coming out of that like Gen X, the Gen X childhood was really dominated by that Spielberg Lucas
big time
duality, and
yeah.
I love those guys. But I think for Jaws does something, I think, to the filmmaker mind because it is such a Swiss watch. And I just saw it recently for the first time on film. I went to the Egyptian and saw it on 35
Nice.
on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And I'd never actually seen it on film before. I've watched Jaws hundreds of times, and it's mostly been on either a disc or a VHS tape. It was so interesting to watch this pretty good copy, but still scratchy copy, and seeing it the way people saw it when it was first released. And I had such a new appreciation for it. People were screaming in the same spots. Yep. And I just realized just what an incredible film that is, what an achievement.
It has a sophistication to its filmmaking that is, every time you revisit it, you'll get more and more and more. It's so deep. And I think contrasting that to a lot of the Spielberg Lucas stuff, which is super fun, there is something about Jaws that becomes this class because you can look at it just for blocking, just for editing, just for where the camera's placed and how the camera's moved. For the music, the editing is incredible. You know,
think like Star Wars. Star Wars is amazing, but you don't necessarily study it for the cinematography.
Right.
It's the imagination.
Yeah.
Jaws is a movie where the camera seems to be, as you just said, like driving the story.
Yep.
It's the first time you're introduced to that perspective. I am the shark. Mm-hmm. All these things will get the filmmaker mind ticking if that's a direction you want to go.
Absolutely.
And I noticed it a lot on the big screen, and I think you're right. You can watch it for the editing. It's a movie where every facet of the film might be the best ever. It might be the best score ever.
Yeah.
I personally believe it's the best poster ever.
Yeah.
The best film poster. Mm-hmm. The title, like every aspect of that film. Someone described it to me as a B-level monster movie directed with A-level craft.
Yeah.
And I thought about that description and I was like, yeah, there's so many bad versions of Jaws that could have happened if you didn't
have sense.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, try comparing.
Yeah.
Like he kind of, by the way, talk about dropping the mic on something like no one's ever made a shark movie.
I know.
Like he just got...
It defined and then like obliterated the entire subgenre. There's no way to approach it. Yeah.
It's just like, bye. See you 40 years later when you're still trying to make a scary version of this.
Yeah.
God, yeah, man. I mean, this is the thing, catching up, because I always love catching up with you, but I have to stop myself because I'm like, well, I could just do an hour with Jaws.
Yeah, we could just do Jaws. Yeah.
On Jaws.
Well, let's get back to film school. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you are in film school. You've loved Jaws. You've been the movie guy. You're unique in this because you have an interest in acting and in filmmaking. And I want to talk about your acting because you inhabit a very rarefied corner of this industry. Where you can function beautifully on both sides of the camera.
Oh,
I cannot do that. Most of us cannot do that and should not do that. You're great for that. But there you are in film school.
Yep.
You meet James Wan, and this is a friendship that develops, very quickly, and you guys start working together. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about where Saw comes from. How does that come into your lives?
Saw came about after film school, so we did 3 years. That was and we graduated, and we were met with the cold winds of reality. As anyone who's been to film school knows that you're within this nurturing world, and then when it's over, you realize, oh, the world doesn't care about my filmmaking ambitions, and we were just kicking around from job to job. I think James was doing corporate videos for some crappy little company, and I had been working on a TV show as a movie critic. So it was kind of a good job, but I was sitting there interviewing Wes Craven thinking, I don't want to interview Wes Craven. I want to be Wes Craven.
Right.
So I was being, typical early 20s, like not appreciating my current reality, just looking forward. And eventually James and I, we just got so frustrated. It's funny you mention acting and directing because one folds into the other. The actual light bulb birth moment of Saw was I came very close on a movie in an acting role. It was down to me and one other guy, and I'm in Australia, and I fly up to Sydney, and it's, my fourth callback for this movie, and I get the call from my agent, and you can just tell they use a specific tone of voice,
right,
and you don't get the job.
Yep.
It sounds like this. In Australia, it's hey mate, and I was like, shit. He didn't need to say anything more.
Yeah.
I just knew. I just dropped the phone and was like, shit. And he was like, yep. When I finally picked the phone up, he's like, I'm sorry, they went with the other guy. And the thing about acting, it's so powerless. You're so reliant on this panel of jurors to select you you can't practice your art unless you're given permission. That's the great thing about writing is you can just, you don't need anyone's permission to pick up a notepad and write. You need everyone's permission to act. So I was just so disappointed, and I called James and I was like, can I use 4-letter words on this podcast?
I was like, fucking can, yeah.
I was like, fuck this. I remember calling him on my chunky little early 2000s Nokia flip phone. I was like, fuck this. I was like, I'm so sick of this. Let's just make our own film. A feature film. We'll pay for it. We'll save up. And this was early 2000s, so the Blair Witch had just come out. There was a bunch of movies like Pi. Yep. If you remember that, and you would have been, I'm sure, really in tune with this wave of like indie movies that would actually do well commercially.
Yeah, it was a renaissance for indies.
Totally.
Renaissance, yeah.
Again, we could talk about just that. It was really empowering. And even films like Memento, I remember staggering out of the movie theater just like, I have to.
Yeah.
It was so small scale. It was a character study of one guy. It felt very achievable.
And you're seeing people do it, and you're like, they could do this.
Yes.
If they could do this, surely I can do something.
Yes. Like all those barriers to entry when a movie
Yep.
has cars flying off a cliff, all of that was gone.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful moment. And, it stretches back into the 90s with Reservoir Dogs and films like that.
Absolutely.
But I remember post Blair Witch, I just said to James, let's just make our own film with our own money. And that was it. That was, from that point on, that was our singular mission. And we killed ourselves to come up with a concept that could be done in one room. Those were the guardrails. It has to be all set in one room. And finally we hit upon this idea for Saw, and that was it. That was the start of the whole journey, was us just being like, let's pay for it.
And you make a short to kind of prove what you're going to do, right?
Yes, we wrote a script, and then my agent at the time said, don't make this with your own money because you have $10,000 and that's not enough. Why don't you give it to me for a year and I'll go and find real money. I'll go and find $1 million. Mm-hmm. The problem is at the time in Australia, there was no support for genre films. Horror movies now are getting made in Australia. I see films like Talk to Me, and I'm so proud of that. But at the time, God, no, nothing. And so she had an uphill battle. After a year, lo and behold, she didn't get the money. And we were like, all right, give us our script back and we'll go and make it with whatever we have left from that original piggy bank. And she said, no, give me 6 more months and I'll take it to the US where they do make these kind of films.
Huh.
And so the original plan was she just wanted to sell the script. And, I think her plan was, you'll take the money from the sale. And James and I at the last minute said, let's pick one scene from the movie and shoot it, like a little proof of concept, as you said. And that was it. We made a little 7-minute DVD, and we came over to LA and did a bunch of meetings. And I think without that movie, it wouldn't have been a conversation that James would have directed. And
absolutely not.
It would have been a script sale. In fact, it's funny. Some of the bigger companies we were meeting with, like DreamWorks, they were all talking about sizing it up. Like, let's put car chases in it. Like, why do they have to spend the whole movie in one room?
Right.
And that short film that we made really put it on the path that it went on.
And that's something I think a lot of people, scraping together enough resources to make a short back then was a big fucking deal. Today, most aspiring filmmakers have a camera in their pocket that's better than the cameras we made our first pieces of work on. And
it's a really interesting topic. I mean, it's a whole nother thing to talk about with you, Mike. Like, I've noticed, I've even gotten in trouble before years ago on Twitter for suggesting, like, hey, you have a camera in your pocket. Like,
use
people would push back and say, oh, that's insulting. You're a gatekeeper. You're this, you're that. And I was astounded because, when you and I were in film school, there were so many prohibitive costs.
Oh, yeah.
Just the cost of 16 mil film. I mean, I had to sell my car. It was crazy. Like, the democratization of filmmaking technology is a gift. And when I say to younger filmmakers, go out there and shoot something, edit it on your laptop, shoot it on your phone, or if you don't want to shoot it on your phone because you find that insulting, find somebody with a Canon 5D camera.
Exactly.
These are things I would have killed for in film school. When I'm saying that to younger filmmakers, I'm not trying to insult them by saying scale down your ambitions and be happy with the phone in your pocket. I'm saying push into that pack.
Yes.
And somehow it's become this raw nerve for some younger people, I think.
I understand that, but I completely agree with you that the message there isn't enjoy your phone and have a good time.
Yeah, stop complaining.
And the message there is with the phone in your pocket, you can create a key that will open the door to the industry and prove your bona fides as a director. And without it, that isn't going to open. Like, they aren't going to just let you. If you could have a great idea, you could have a great script. They're not going to let you make it.
100%. I mean,
you need to prove it.
That short we made, we could have done that on a Canon 5D or some camera. We would have done that at that time. Instead, we had to pony up for a 16 mil film, and it was very expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars that we didn't really have. And we took a huge risk we were essentially spending what was up until that point our life savings, literally our life savings.
Yeah.
And imagine not having to take that risk. Imagine being able to have the same idea, but captured with a great quality, But look, if younger people are pushing back saying, we don't want to hear that you say that we should be happy with our phones, then I'm like, okay, great, do what's good for you. But I think at that time this was all the only option we had.
Now, you are in a fascinating place as you make Saw, because it's your script. This is, like you said, you've put your life on the line, but you're also on screen. And you're putting yourself out there as an actor as well, which is an enormously vulnerable place to be.
Totally.
In a movie where, like you said, it is one room. It is all about character dynamics and interdynamics. And if you are the weak link on that floor next to Carrie Elwes, like if that's the way it's going to go, you're sunk. But you rise to that occasion beautifully.
Oh, thanks.
And that establishes you now as a force in front of and behind the camera instantaneously on this first debut feature. Did you feel additional pressure having to perform? And was it always your intention coming out of that you're like, yes, my career is two-pronged, three-pronged, really. You are going to be attacking your work from these various levels of responsibility.
It's a great question because I haven't thought about this in a while, but originally it was more of a two-pronged thing. It was interesting. I was almost envious of James Wan's certainty. He only ever wanted to be a director. It's one job that he wanted, and that's all he wanted to do.
Have you ever been tempted to force him to act in one of your things? So he'll learn.
I forced him to act in the third Insidious film, which I directed.
Oh, that's right.
I put him in there.
Of course.
And he was pretty good. I was like, oh, come on, man. And he was definitely a multi-talented guy. I mean, his illustration skills, James can draw like a great comic book artist. He's so multi-talented, but he just had this one goal, whereas I was more all over the map. I think it took me a while to work out. I just wanted to be near this thing. I just loved movies. Yeah. There wasn't really an aspect of movies that I loved. It was everything. And so when I finished film school, I was like, look, there's strength in numbers, and I could recognize James's talent. It's almost like the analogy I use is like, if you join a band and Kurt Cobain is one of the members, you let him write the songs. People are always saying to Dave Grohl, as an old grunge fan, I hear these interviews and they'll say like, why didn't you contribute more songs to Nirvana? And he's like, because Kurt Cobain was in the band. Like that job was covered. I was happy to punch the drum kit behind him. It wasn't until, Kurt Cobain passed away that he was like, I think I'll crawl out of the shadows. It's a version of that. Like with James, I was like, this guy's got it covered. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't like writing and he doesn't know how to. So I became his writer. And then but I also loved acting. And so I felt very scattershot early on in a way. Like I would write things and appear in them. And it wasn't until I directed that I was like, oh, I think I want to put all my eggs in this one basket because I love it so much. It encompasses, it's such a multidisciplinary art form, film directing. You can indulge design interests, fashion, sound, music. It's very multidisciplinary. That's very satisfying. I mean, do you agree?
Oh my God, I agree with you so much. And I loved acting as well. I was a theater minor at school.
In college or in high school? Okay.
I wasn't good at it. You're good at it. I couldn't do it. But I loved it. And I've always loved actors. I love acting. I know enough about it to be able to talk to actors and understand a little about what they're going through. You know it in a very intimate way. And I'm fascinated to kind of know when you transition to directing, right? Because you come out, Saw is a massive success. All right. And you and James stick together, and you're making other films together right out the gate. You kind of work your way to Insidious. And by the time I got to TIFF with Oculus, the sale of Insidious out of TIFF was legendary. Right. That was the shadow we were hoping very much to step into.
Right. That was a fun night.
I've heard so many stories about that night, from the sales perspective.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But so you make this movie, you're again in front of the camera. You've created this character in Specs that becomes, again,
it was just like a lark, like, hey, I'll act in it with my friend.
Which is a wonderful, wonderful character.
Yeah,
but this is also going to carry you kind of into becoming a director on your own. Talk about that transition.
That transition, I guess in my mind at that point, I was thinking, well, I'll direct one day. And then James, he went off and did The Conjuring, which was such a huge hit that it kind of opened these doors to big studio blockbusters, and suddenly he was doing a Fast and Furious movie.
Right.
And there was an interesting little period there when he went off to do Fast and Furious 7, I think. I knew he wasn't coming back.
Right.
From that world. Oh, and it was this interesting period of mourning, almost like a breakup, where I was thinking, who am I without James? Like I had this little identity crisis. I had been so used to being part of this duo. We would do interviews together and, everyone would refer to us like Whannell. It was like, whatever, we were a duo. And to have that cut off, I was like, wait, who am I? And in that period of wondering who the hell I was, what I was going to do next, Jason Blum came in and was like, buddy.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Those who know, if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, buddy, you're directing the third Insidious movie. And I was like, it's a great testament to the fact that, the best way to learn to skydive is someone just pushes you out of the plane.
Yeah.
You'll never jump.
No.
Once you get up there, you're like, this was a bad idea. And the instructor shoves you out of the plane. And Jason's great at that. I was like, I'm not sure. I think I do want to direct one day, but it's going to be something, serious. It's going to be, it's something very heartfelt from, he's like, no, buddy. No. Insidious 3. And the next thing I knew, it's a testament to Jason's Jedi mind power that I found myself on the set. And he was right. It was actually the perfect movie to get my feet wet as a director because having written the first two, I knew the world. I was very comfortable with Lin Shaye and the actors, and I was like, all right, this is... And, I think I heard too many war stories from James over the years. I figured out that directors love telling war stories.
Oh, yeah.
Rarely do you hear a film director say, oh, my God, so much fun.
Had a great time.
Had a great time. Yeah. And so I was preparing. I had my armor on. I was ready for the worst. And somewhere about halfway through the shoot, I was like, I think I'm having fun. Is that legal? And... I discovered that I loved it. Like, where have you been all my life? And subsequently thought, oh, I'm getting such a late start. I don't know what it was like on your first movie, the fear of like, oh God, I'm in charge of all these people.
Paralyzing.
Paralyzing.
Yeah.
That's when you get to set like 2 hours early before everyone else is there.
Yeah. It's a mixture of nausea and imposter syndrome that just will not let go. And didn't let go of me for, I don't know if it's ever let go of me.
Really?
Ever.
No. I mean, for me, I still, maybe you sort of start to feel like this won't all fall over. I'll stop it from falling off a cliff. But the sense that this is the one that exposes you as a fraud.
They're going to figure you out.
Terrible movie. Yeah. So that never has gone away. But yeah, it was just, that was it. Just being pushed by Jason and I was suddenly like, oh, I'm just going to put all my attention on this, you know. And I still love to write my own stuff, so I'm still writing things. But it's been really fantastic. I love making films. It's just so fun. I mean, even at its
I'm
worst.
so glad that you do. Just as a fan of films. And this
I always say the worst day on a film set is still better than the best day in someone else's job. Yeah, for me.
Sure.
You know, I guess that's why we're here, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't put up with all the crap that comes along with making films.
And there's a lot of crap. There's a lot of crap that comes with it.
There's so much.
But there are these transcendent moments of just like childlike joy.
What are the moments for you? What are the moments of transcendence for you on a film? Is it like, do you know, like at this point is the point where I might have one of those moments where the joy just comes back?
It's usually, it happens at monitor more than anywhere else, where I'll see something happen that's either it's like, oh, it's exactly kind of what I thought, or even better, this is better than what I thought. You know,
which like this actor is making the writing better than I could have ever done.
Exactly. It's like I get so excited watching an amazing actor do something unexpected, do something that really just lifts it up. I love watching when you're really fucked on a day and like there's no way you're gonna finish. You know, you're not, the scene that you imagined is gone. Like now it's about picking up the pieces and making it. And watching the crew come together for creative problem solving and that kind of like triple gainer landing. You know, when you stick the end of the day and you've got a scene that's even better for all the improvisation that you had to do. And you've watched all these people pour themselves into it to kind of hoist this thing up. It's like the last shot of you see One Cut of the Dead. That last shot of all of them making the human pyramid to hold up the camera, which I'm like, that just encapsulates like the best possible kind of moment on a film set.
It is. And do you have the same moments in post? For me, I find sound mixing is
rocks. Yeah.
Like when you're sitting on a sound mixing stage and it's on a theater screen for the first time and you're like, oh, it's a movie. Yeah. I made a movie.
Could not agree more. My favorite part of the whole process is the mix. I love it and so much. It's when it's a movie. It's when it's a movie.
And it's pure creativity.
And it stands up. Yeah.
It's all free. Like so many things you ask for in a film cost money. I love being able to say to the mixer, like, can we just... And they can just try it because sound is just they're able to manipulate. You don't need to build something to make the sound. You know, a prop, a set doesn't have to be built. It just feels like pure creativity. Yeah, I love it so much.
It's an amazing thing. Amazing thing. Now I'd love to talk. I know, and I've already. We're having a good time, everybody. So, what I'd love to do is take a very, very brief commercial break. We'll throw this to our sponsors and then come back and talk about The Invisible Man.
All right.
All right. So, quick break to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back for the movie. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Director's Commentary. I'm Mike Flanagan. I'm here with Leigh Whannell, and we're about to talk about The Invisible Man. Now, The Invisible Man was released in 2020. Great year at the box office, famously. You directed your... well, it was for you guys, actually. You were
we were the last film in theaters.
I think I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I have heard ArcLight Hollywood, which is it's like a religious place for me. Yeah. Which has been shuttered.
R.I.P. for now, I know. Yeah. I'm still waiting for it to come back alive.
Me too.
Sometime soon.
Desperately waiting and fearing it'll never be the same, even if it wakes up again. But the rumor I've heard, it's all boarded up. The rumor I've heard is that one of the boards came down and people could look through and see the lobby as it was frozen when the pandemic hit, and that your poster
Still
is
up there.
up there in the place of huge prominence that it is the Invisible Man, frozen forever in time.
I mean, what I wouldn't give to see that, I'm sure it's like it is the Statue of Liberty at the end of Planet of the Apes. It is the final mark when the aliens come down to this ruined land. They'll just be like, Invisible Man. I guess this must be what they were into.
There's something so beautifully like 12 Monkeys about that. Where it's like society stopped it at the Invisible Man. It's exactly. So great. Oh my God.
I don't know whether to be mortified or excited by that. I was like, oh God, please don't let my film be the obituary for this art form. We're all walking around in biohazard suits, like acting things out with shadow puppets for our kids. In the before times, there were movies such as this.
Such as The Invisible Man.
I took this from a bus stop, young child. The Invisible Man.
All right, so 2020, you directed your own script for Blumhouse and Universal. The film stars Elizabeth Moss, Oliver Jackson Cohen, Aldous Hodge, Storm Reed, Harriet Dyer, and Michael Dorman. It was a huge hit. It grossed $145 million worldwide on a $7 million budget, you son of a bitch. It was a critical hit as well. Currently sporting a certified 92% fresh rating with like 400 and change reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, which also like, God damn it, man. Like, Jesus. So tell me how this movie came into your life.
Well, I was finishing Upgrade, and Upgrade was an interesting one because that was another low-budget sci-fi action movie.
With Blumhouse again.
With Blumhouse, yeah. And it wasn't getting the release I wanted. They were going to do like a smaller release, and Universal called me in for a meeting, and I was certain they were going to be telling me how great Upgrade was. So I ran to the meeting for my yearly supply of praise that, you know, screenwriters collect like squirrels collecting nuts for the winter. It's like you got to get it where you can. And then when I got there, they didn't want to talk about Upgrade at all. And I was with a bunch of these Universal executives, and I'm thinking, why am I here? And eventually they started talking about the Dark Universe and how they had put all this money into it and hadn't worked out. It had been this big flop, and they just didn't, you know, they were really disappointed.
I remember their office there, which had like, it had all this crazy, like they had the like electric, you know, effects going up the, right. Like just the Dark Universe office to go in and pitch was just like, this is a ride. Like they spent more money on. I mean, they
took those photos exactly. Like the talk about putting the cart before the horse. They spent all the money on the presentation, and it didn't work out. And I was, of course, trying to be polite and thinking about exactly stuff like that. I didn't want to, you know, push the thumb down on the wound anymore and say, yeah, God, what a failure. So I was saying, no, I'm, you know, and they just said, well, what do you know, one of the executives said, you know, to be fair to these movies, they're hard to write because if the Invisible Man's the good guy, who's the bad guy? You know, what's the Invisible Man afraid of? How do you come up with a bad guy that can fight with him? And I just said, well, he's not the good guy. That's the answer. He's the bad guy. Yeah. And then I walked out and didn't think much of it. And my agent called me and was like, they loved your pitch for the Invisible Man.
The pitch being, he's the bad guy.
Yeah, he's the bad. And I said, I didn't pitch anything.
He's the monster.
Yeah, all I said was, you just don't make him the good guy. That's how you solve that problem. And he said, well, whatever you said, they like it and they'd like you to get started. So that was how it came to life. It was one of those weird examples of how this river of life just pushes you in these directions, especially in the film industry, something you never expected. One conversation, one scribble on a bar napkin can equal 3 years of your life.
Completely. Yeah.
Someone can hand you a book and you don't even know it, but it's about to be your life. And that was really that one meeting. Next thing I know, I'm writing the screenplay, and that was it. And
you're under the umbrella of Universal because you know they're going to finance the movie. You know they're going to release the movie. You've got Blumhouse, who's now worked with you in a number of capacities on a number of movies. So you've got trust there. You're writing your movie. I assume you go through the iterative process of the script. You get your green light. You start casting. Tell me about that. How does the cast come together?
The cast was, you know, it was one of those rare occasions where the script had a really good reaction. Like agents would cold call me and be like, hey, I want to pitch so-and-so. And, that was a new experience for me to have these marketable actors, being thrown at me and sort of feeling like I had some choice to make instead of a lot of times when you're making a film, you're grabbing at straws to put your cast together. But I'm sure once you've built up a reputation, I'm sure with you, when you're doing something after you've done House of Usher and you've done this stuff, now people are coming to you, which is a great feeling, wanting to be part of it. Actually, and thanks to you for Oliver Jackson Cohen. That's where I discovered him.
Yeah.
And was like, this guy. So I was going through that process of, it was really a character piece. So it was this one actor in the lead role. And Elizabeth Moss, actually Donna Langley at Universal said, we just did Us with Elizabeth Moss. What do you think about her? And I was a huge fan of Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
And it just suddenly made sense. There had been other people we'd been considering, but I thought, I'd want to see that film. Like, she is such an incredible... She's one of those actors who is defined by her skill. Yeah. If actors have a shtick, like there's the funny guy, there's the good-looking guy. There are those people, the Meryl Streeps and the Philip Seymour Hoffmans, that are... Their thing is that they're really good.
Right.
And I really feel like Elizabeth is at that level. Having watched her come up through Mad Men and everything else. And as soon as I met with her, I was like, oh, this is it. So that was really it. The rest of the cast kind of was backing her up,
Sure. All right. Well, look, I think it's just about time for us to dive in and watch this movie together.
Let's do it.
This is a great place to declare that is a wrap on our Act 1 episode. We're heading now into Act 2, and we so hope that you'll join us at home.
Stay tuned for Act 2 of Director's Commentary. Director's Commentary is a SpectreVision radio production recorded at Spotify Studios in downtown Los Angeles, California. Hosted by Mike Flanagan. Executive producers Mike Flanagan, Daniel Noah, and Jim Perry. Producers Lawrence Ingley, Stephen Demler, Mike Risley, and Elijah Wood. Associate producer Alexandra Magistro. On-set producer Christina Campagnola. Music by Morgan Whirlage. Edited and mixed by Graham Resnick. Art by Telepath. Director's Commentary is a production of SpectreVision Radio.